We have got Barrett sitting here and waiting to tell us really important stuff about what has happened to him in recent years. So let's move on now to the USA and welcome Barrett Brown. You know, many people are excited to see you here, Barrett. He is one of the foremost experts on the issue of the commercialization of spying and the targeting of activists and journalists, including himself. He has been extensively persecuted by them, and yet he has triumphed regardless. Barrett is possibly the only journalist to win some of the most prestigious journalism awards in his country while being in solitary confinement. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Barrett Brown.
Thank you very much for having me. Today I want to talk about a little bit what we've already discussed regarding the situation with our respective nation states. Briefly, let me just give you my background. I was a journalist. I got involved with Anonymous towards the end of 2010 when they were helping to assist the Tunisian revolution. And shortly after I got involved there, we had a run-in with an intelligence contractor. This is one of the many firms that have risen, especially in the US, that cater to the US government, its intelligence and military establishment and law enforcement, as well as governments abroad and private interests, corporations and that sort of thing. So because of this altercation that arose between Anonymous and this particular intelligence contractor, there was a raid in which Anonymous stole 70,000 emails from a firm called H.B. Gary. Those emails revealed a massive and very bizarre plot set in motion by the Department of Justice itself to go after activists and to go after journalists who were deemed supportive of WikiLeaks, as well as some other just random left-wing groups that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce opposed. They were going to use techniques that, had any of us done them, we would have been charged for. They were, in some cases borderline illegal, in some cases explicitly illegal. But of course, none of them were ever charged for it. Instead, even though this fellow had to resign, this contractor fellow, and even though a investigation was called for in the House of Congress, on the floor of Congress, the FBI went after us, and particularly me, and I was under surveillance for a while, and then I was raided, and my mother was raided. My mother was threatened with charges, and I made some declarations online that I was going to use the same tactics that these intelligence contractors had used against us on the lead FBI agent in my case, and then we would see if they're illegal when I do them, or if they're still legal when the other fellow does them. And of course, I was raided for that, and thereafter charged for these other issues. I had copied and pasted a link from one chat room to another after the Stratford hack, when I was going over stolen emails to get my investigations for the articles that I was writing. And they charged me for that, saying that because some of these files, unbeknownst to me, were credit card numbers, that I had engaged in massive credit card fraud, even though their own forensics showed that I never opened the file myself, etc. Those charges were eventually dropped. I depleted some other things and went to prison for 4 years. While there, I tried to document the U.S. prison system's very unusual due process situation. Short version is it doesn't really exist. And got out about 9 months ago and have set about since then trying to build up a new framework. Something that will take the agility that we've seen, the potential for mass collaboration online, build upon the central fact of the 21st century, which is that any individual can now collaborate with any other individual across the planet for the first time in history. It's my opinion that we don't know what that means yet, that we're very early on in the information age, and we have not yet grasped the full implications of what it means to be in an environment entirely different from the environment in which our nation states and our institutions grew up. These institutions were built in part because of the limitations that we had on collaboration. Those limitations no longer exist. The environment's changed. That means there a period of a global correction will be occurring over the next several decades. I want to take full advantage of that. I want to ensure that people who are opposed to the police state, opposed to the drug war, opposed to the surveillance state, and respects individual rights and the rights of others, have an advantage over these institutions and nation states that don't necessarily hold those views. And to that end, the pursuance system which you can see, you can learn more about at pursuanceproject.org, will be implemented in the next few months on an invitation basis. We'll be bringing on several hundred people who, who selected as having backgrounds in activism, academia, journalism, research, and allow them to build up their own entities, their own collaborative entities. Everyone will have the equal right to create and grow these little groups that we call pursuances for various ends, and they'll be able to connect amongst each other. Eventually, we suspect this will lead to the development of a refined yet vast superorganism, a civic entity spanning the globe and capable of confronting criminalized nation states wherever necessary. This kind of thing, I think, is inevitable. And we've actually had some great successes simply because of how clearly the situation has deteriorated in the US and elsewhere. Our institutions, from law enforcement to the presidency to Congress, no longer maintain much respect, for the citizenry. That's a window of opportunity. That means that people with other ideas can now get those ideas seriously considered. And as proof, we've been able to recruit some somewhat mainstream people into this project, and I'll announce more about that later on in the my next Intercept column, which will go over the board of directors and all that good stuff. So meanwhile, the issues, there are a lot of issues that, around the world we've tried to emphasize. Obviously, the Internet Party and other similar organizations, including the pirate parties and whatnot, have quite correctly concentrated largely on the surveillance state. There is an array of propaganda technologies, some of which we learned about via these hacks that Anonymous did, and which we obviously figured out more of after Snowden released further NSA documents, that I think are a fundamental issue. They are an issue of concern to everyone who has an agenda that is contrary to the agenda of powerful interests across the world. Sort of the common agenda of nation states: security, order, the ability to and the inclination to view citizens as just another factor, something to be considered and gotten around if necessary. There are so many new technologies and new methodologies, some of which are old methodologies that are now been refined, that because of the internet, because of the nature of the internet, can now be pursued in ways that would have been unimaginable to the greatest tyrants of the 20th century. Persona management is one of the technologies that was revealed in this HB Gary hack, and it's something we pursued afterwards with my group, Project PM, which was intent on overseeing the investigation into these things. Persona management involves the ability of a single operator to control like 15 to 20 fake online people, complete with very complete backgrounds, social media presence, obviously, but also a software that helps to maintain conversations, maintain consistency in communication, not just translating to other languages if necessary, but even maintaining a particular linguistic cadence. We know a bit about what its capabilities are because we saw the CENTCOM's request for applications that this company had responded to. We later figured out which company had won that contract. And from their request and from patents that we later discovered involving IBM and some military people from years back, as well as tax filings, we were able to get a sense of what they can do with this. And if you're familiar at all with the history of law enforcement engaging in infiltration, false flags, agents, profiteers, all that sort of thing, you know how dangerous that capability can be. And my concern is that capability to alter, to manufacture events and to alter perceptions, that will be vastly enhanced over the next years, because you have so many companies who it's in their economic interest to develop these technologies. And we have the US government and others encouraging those technologies. And we've also seen a great deal about what these companies like Finfisher in Europe and this other one out of Italy that was exposed a few years ago, plus most of them in the US, who they've been willing to work with. And they've been willing to work with Bahrain, for instance. We've got a company called Corvus that is happy to do propaganda for the Kingdom of Bahrain to discredit activists who are risking their lives trying to establish democracy there. We've seen, Finfisher having served the Egyptian governments and other tyrannies to go after their own people. So we know that there's motivation there. We know there's will. We know there is an economic impetus. And we know that even when these things have been caught out, even when we, for instance, were managed to expose an indefensible conspiracy against our very democracy, that no one is really going to suffer any consequences. Well, on the other hand, obviously, those of us who are involved in exposing them will suffer the ultimate consequences. We'll have our families threatened. We'll be harassed. We'll be jailed, imprisoned, pursued by irregular charges, subjected to all sorts of, very newish, very cutting-edge propaganda techniques. We saw from one of Snowden's documents was a GCHQ slide, Britain's spy agency, detailing how they go after Anonymous, what techniques they can use to put this information out, attack people's phones, for instance, something I was having trouble with back in the day. And so this is a difficult situation. It's an uphill battle. And because of that, because it's so hard, even when you get the information out, to get the media at large to pay attention to it and to maintain attention on it for as long as it's necessary to actually get these things addressed, we have to look back at our advantages and what works and what successes we've had in the past, isolate those, look at what deficiencies creep into this kind of online collaboration, and build upon that. Again, the pursuance system is something that number of people who have been involved in both this online activism and traditional activism and a number of kind of related fields, something we've refined over a long period of time, especially in the last 9 months, to address a lot of the problems that do come up when you have large numbers of people organizing. And so what I'd like to see, regardless of whether or not anyone chooses to contribute to this system, to apply to work in this system, everyone who feels that they have a duty to correct the deficiencies of the states that they support by their tax dollars, everyone should be looking at ways to improve the means of collaboration, to improve how we organize, how we take advantage of what our advantages are. Our advantages are that there are many, many of us, that we have skills running the gamut from every imaginable field. We have collectively a great deal of independent knowledge about certain things that can be pulled. We have extraordinary research skills to the extent that we use collaborative research, crowdsourced research, which we did very successfully with the intelligence contracting investigation. And we have ultimately the ability, just like the unions did 120 years ago, to affect outcomes, so long as we do keep our eyes on the fundamental efficiency of how we do things. And that should always be the emphasis. Each of these other issues can all be better pursued to the extent that we hit those fundamental efficiencies, to the extent that we fundamentally move to the next step in how we organize in the internet age. And obviously parties like the New Zealand Internet Party are a very important portion of that. Institutions exist, and so long as they exist, there's a great deal of hard work that needs to be done within those institutions to keep them afloat, to keep them from going entirely rabid, as they have in my country. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate the work you guys are doing to help free your own country from my country, which is always a difficult endeavor. And I hope everyone will check out pursuanceproject.org and give some thought to signing up and spread the word. And again, even look at developing your own options as well. This is something that's supposed to be, it's intended to be universal. It's intended to work with whatever it is that you have going on, whatever your projects are. It's something that should facilitate that ideally. But I think it's just the first step, or the next step rather, in a long process that we'll see over the next decades, where we really begin to build up formidable entities up to the task, up to the challenges before us, because the challenges are obviously extraordinary. And we're not the only ones who understand the internet. A lot of the governments understand the internet, and that's a problem. That means our understanding has to be just as equal as theirs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barrett. Barrett, you told us a little bit about Pursuance. Can you tell us, like, what stage is it at? When are you expecting your 1.0 to be released? And are you guys going commercial mass market, or are you going to have different versions for activists and people who are more of a threat? I'm really interested to hear some more about Pursuance, because I know there are a lot of people working behind the scenes on it right now.
We have what's called the minimum viable product being produced, and this is all being done open source. It's got a GitHub page and all that. So we'll be experimenting with this with some early participants later in a few months, and kind of just working out the kinks. And then over time, we'll be bringing in more people who have signed up, who applied. We have other people that we're actually going after as well, like asking them, hey, we want you in the system. And each of them will be able to bring on other people. Anyway, so as time goes on, we'll add more features. The bare bones version itself should be that itself should be a improved procedure over how we organize these things so far. I mean, back when I worked with Anonymous and back when we had Project PM, this was all done out of IRC channels, which is fine. You had collaborative type pads, and that works for some things, but it also brings its own dangers. So we want something where everyone will be able to define the terms of their relationships in a more formal way, where everyone is on the same page. So if everyone can come in and create a group, everyone has that right, and to define how that group expands and to delegate power to the extent they want to. Obviously there'll be groups that'll be very democratic. There'll be groups that are more top down, where people are agreeing that I want to work. Help this journalist, for instance, do crowdsourcing, or I'm interested in this. So there won't be a lot of energy taken up in philosophical conversations over who gets to do what. Everyone can always create their own pursuance and define it however they want. Anyone who joins a pursuance does so knowing what the agreements are. That's going to keep that's going to deter one of the big problems that chased out a lot of very capable people from Anonymous, is that suddenly you're dealing with, you don't know who. May not be who may be someone who's there for their own sort of emotional needs. Activist groups can't be support groups. They have to be vanguard groups. They have to be up to very considerable tasks, and that's not always possible with the conglomeration of just whoever wants to get involved. So free association is very much an emphasis here. The freedom to not associate with as well. So you'll have all these structures, and you'll have people experimenting with these forms, with how you organize things. And over time, you're going to see some templates established. You'll see people that manage to build up a structure that works very well for a particular end. They'll also oftentimes resubmit that to our central library that everyone has access to. And so you'll see the system evolve in that sense. You also see it evolve in the senses that each individual pursuance, each individual group will find areas of collaboration, potential efficiency by working with other groups. So these groups will join up and build up various alliances, based on terms that they both agree to, information sharing, sharing of resources. You'll have groups that are specialized in going around, joining other pursuances briefly to provide them a specialized service, like coding, building up online campaigns, design, that kind of thing, things that many pursuances will only need once or twice. You'll have NGOs and nonprofits that already exist able to better harness their supporters. There's a great line from by Rick Falkreath, founder of the Swedish Pirate Party. I haven't read his book yet, Swarm something, I forgot, but someone quoted this to me. He was telling somebody who, as I think an activist group or a nonprofit, we don't need to be talking about the people who work for you. We need to be talking about the people who want to work for you, but you don't let them. And so this is something that's not just intended for emergent groups to come out of nothing. It's intended to combine that while also allowing the existing institutions that are doing important work to get involved in these same processes in ways that won't necessarily commit much time and no money, but will allow them to take the next step. We've been organizing things fundamentally in the same ways we've been doing it for hundreds of years. Journalism still works the same way journalism worked 100 years ago. You have a writer, an editor, and a fact checker. It doesn't work. Anyone who's been covered quite a bit by the press knows how haphazard the process really is. We have institutions that are still, they have not yet begun to act as if this was an age of potential mass collaboration. And so this is intended to encourage that, to encourage institutions and individual people to start thinking along those lines and to show them what can be done. We have successes we can point to, even with the haphazard methodology that Anonymous used and that sort of thing. Extraordinary successes sometimes. Again, this is early on. So we can extrapolate that there is a great yield that can be achieved to the extent that we get our shit together as a movement and bring in other movements and bring in nonprofits, bring in institutions, and start waging real war against the array of criminalized nation states that we've inherited from history.
And there's not a whole lot to feel optimistic about these days, but I think you've just achieved it. Barrett, I've just got one last question for you. I know that the harassment of you and the persecution of you continues to this day. I know that there has been summons, or can you just update us about exactly what has happened with The Intercept and with your book publishers? And what do you think is going to happen to you going forward? What are your plans for dealing with these people?
The first run-in I had post-release was when they rearrested me for doing interviews. I had an interview scheduled with Vice Television and then another one the following week with PBS. And the head of the regional BOP, told me that since I was still under BOP, guidance or oversight, I couldn't do interviews. I explained to her that's not true. I referred her to the BOP manual on inmate interactions with the press. So explained that I've done interviews from prison over and over again. No one's made that claim, that no such rule exists. I got her on phone, recorded the conversation, got them threatening me to have me rearrested for doing interviews. And then the next day they did rearrest me. The marshals came and got me. A few days later, a law firm out of New York that one of my publishers in Dallas for a magazine I write for down here sometimes, the lawyers went to the BOP and challenged the terms of my confinement, threatened to go to the court over it. And rather than have to go in front of a judge and explain why they had rearrested me without doing the proper paperwork or charging me with an infraction, they just released me. And so since then, but anyway, so I got the interviews done. And so there will be several major broadcasts by NPR and PBS and Vice Television over the next few months about the Pursuance system. So we'll be getting our good share of attention for that. And then more recently, they sent a subpoena to the Intercept demanding all communications between myself and the Intercept, demanding all financial records. Sent a similar subpoena a month later to my literary agent in New York, who's handling my book. It'll come out next year. And in both cases, they're claiming that this is being done to make sure I'm paying my restitution properly. Now, I called up the people down there at the federal U.S. Attorney's Office and kind of caught her off guard and recorded it and asked her to explain why this is being done. What is this normal, blah, blah. And she was not able to really, I don't think, sufficiently articulate what it was they were doing and what the justification would have been. So that's going apace. We've got in both cases, their legal teams are responded. In both cases, they told them that no, they're not providing any communications whatsoever. They'll provide the financial records. And meanwhile, I sent an email to all of them, the USDA, my probation officer, et cetera, explaining exactly what my finances were, explaining what payments I've made, explaining that my probation officer does not know anything about what this is, just to make sure that there's a record of me telling them that. Sometimes they pretend like they're confused about things. Like that time they charged me with 22 years mandatory minimum for copying and pasting a link that ended up going to credit card numbers under a statute that only that involves identity theft, which doesn't refer to credit card numbers. It refers to government-issued IDs. They pretended not to know that credit cards are not government-issued IDs, at least not yet. So they have a tendency to kind of, do things on purpose and just sort of pretend them away as mistakes. Say, oops, we didn't do that, So I'm always in a rush to kind of document that and make sure everyone's on the same page. In the future, again, like there's not a great deal I can really do to anticipate these things. I just have to be ready to handle them as they come. That's pretty typical here. Beyond that, when my probation is over, as I announced a while back after I was rearrested for doing interviews, I'm going to be leaving the U.S. as soon as my probation is over. I'll eventually be revoking my citizenship because I want nothing to do with this country or its people, frankly. And I'll still be involved in U.S. politics and U.S. activism. I'll just be doing it from somewhere where they can't just come and arrest me illegally whenever they feel like it. And I want to at least put another barrier between myself and this particular empire. So yeah, it's the kind of thing that, obviously I got used to dealing with years ago, and in prison where I was, spent about 6 months altogether being held in a shoe. Had a lot of run-ins with the authorities there, of course. It's just something that it's just cost of doing business in this country.
So many people around the world do understand and respect the sacrifice that you've made, and indeed that all of us targets of the surveillance state make every day to circulate the truth. And your writing has brought light to many people, so thank you for that.